Hey, pod people, I'm so glad that you decided to tune in today to this podcast with my dear friend, Harmony Slater. We have both been going back and forth to India to study yoga for at least 20 years. And I asked Harmony to be on the podcast to share with us because she's so honest. She's one of the most honest and forthright people I know. And she's also one of the more advanced yoga practitioners in the world. She's also a mom and a national board certified coach for life and business, a spinal energetics practitioner, a yoga teacher. She's kind of a heavy hitter. And she also laughs a lot and is just a very down to earth person. So we talk about sort of her daily routines. We talk about how yoga has evolved over the course of 25 years and what aging looks like, feels like, and how our deep personal work is always evolving and how that can feel and how that can look. And I want it to be an important conversation for everyone to listen to so that, we know we're not alone when we're doing hard work and that we can all do hard things together. So don't go anywhere. You don't want to miss this episode with Harmony Slater. Welcome to Everyday Ayurveda with Kate, a podcast that translates ancient wisdom for modern lives. I'm your host, Kate O'Donnell. I've been living and teaching Ayurveda, India's traditional medicine, for over 25 years, and I've authored 4 best-selling books on bringing Ayurveda practices into our lives. If you're tired of battling digestive issues, hormonal imbalances, menopause symptoms, or are seeking a deeper spiritual connection and purpose, you're in the right place. This podcast is for you, offering practical, accessible advice to help you heal through diet, optimize your daily routines, and enhance your overall well-being. Follow this space for insights on a diet that heals, strategies for better digestion, sleep, hormone health, and direction for finding a deep sense of meaning and purpose. Join me, my pod people, for this empowering journey into self-care and self-discovery. Together, we'll explore how to bring balance and vitality into your everyday life. Let's do this. Hi, Harmony Slater. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Kate O'Donnell. It's so great to be here.
So you listeners, you might hear a little giggling today, because Harmony and I have known each other a really long time through the yoga world. We met in India on kind of various trips, right, over the years. How many years, Harmony, have you been practicing yoga?
I guess, when I first was introduced to yoga, it was probably 1995, but I wouldn't really consider myself like a practitioner of yoga at that time. I was just kind of dabbling and experimenting and taking classes a little bit here and there.
As opposed to like, what is being a practitioner? What does that mean?
To me, I feel like that means having a regular practice, like somewhat regular, like you're dedicated to doing 3 times a week, 4 times a week, whatever I don't know, once a week feels a little bit like, I could go for a run once a week and I wouldn't really consider myself a runner.
Right. That's a great example, right? Or you go to the gym once a week, but are you lifting weights,
Yeah, I'm not really training,
Right. So it's sort of about like consistency and frequency.
I feel like it. Yeah. And are you learning something about it? Are you interested in it beyond just like, this is a nice way to stretch or warm up for a dance class?
Right. Which kind of brings me to the question of the day, Harmony, which is, what is yoga? I know it's a big question, and I know that you also, you studied Eastern religions, right?
I did,
in college. So I think you have a lot of background. And you've also been, how many years have you been doing this now?
Yeah. Really seriously, it's been 24 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost 25 years.
Right. So let me phrase it like this. So 20 years ago, what was yoga and what is yoga to you now?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'm minding my giggling too, because, on my podcast, that's like the main criticism I get is like, she laughs too much. So I'm trying to like be really serious and not laugh about these things. It's hard for me because I find things quite funny in life
Right.
usually.
It's a great problem to have. Great
Yeah.
problem. Great criticism. I love that. Let's giggle more.
Right? It's like, who are these people who don't like happiness? What's wrong with
Yeah.
them?
Right.
Anyway, little sidebar. So that gave me time to think about this question. So, like 20 years ago, I think for me, yoga was a deeply spiritual practice, a technique. It was physical, it was breathing, it was meditation, it was maybe a set of practices and techniques and tools that I was engaged in, interested in, and using to try, potentially, maybe sometimes catch a glimpse of the truth of reality, of God, of the divine within myself, within the world. I mean, for me, it was always, I mean, outside of the dabbling part, but when I really got into it, I got into yoga through meditation, through my studies in philosophy and Eastern religion. So I understood that it was kind of an ancient technology that was used to direct the mind towards something ineffable.
Ooh, an ancient technology to direct the mind towards something ineffable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know that a lot of folks who get involved with yoga really would see it that way.
I don't think it's really sold that way nowadays.
No, it's
Yeah.
not. And it, maybe 20 years ago, it might have been more so. I mean, that was what I was in it for as well.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
pretty weird 20 years ago. It wasn't popular. People, I mean, it was maybe just starting to kind of get popular. But
Right.
if you were really into yoga, you were kind of weird. You were a little bit alternative or punk or hippie or wishing you didn't miss the 60s. You know, it was like a whole scene that was not mainstream.
It's true. It's true. Right. So I'm gonna guess that 20 years later, that bottom line is still present for you. Have there been changes though in what yoga is to you?
Yeah, I feel like my relationship with yoga has changed a lot. I have to close my eyes to answer these questions
That's
because,
great. I love that.
yeah, because it helps me to like really feel into what the answer is. But now I think that yoga, it's still a set of ancient technologies used to connect with the ineffable or to experience the ineffable. But I feel like my definition may have expanded a bit more in that I feel like now yoga is more about how I'm being in my everyday life. So I feel like at first it was really tied to the practices and to these tools or technologies, and it was very much about doing them.
Yes.
And now I feel like it's more about how I'm being in the world rather
Yeah.
than what I'm doing specifically.
Right. Yes. I can relate to that.
Yeah,
That
it's
makes so
funny.
much sense.
Like yoga's both a verb and a noun. And I feel like maybe that's like the transition we're making as practitioners of yoga for many years. It starts off as a doing, as many things do, and it gets integrated into your mind, into your body, and it starts to become more of a way of being and being with yourself, being with others, being with your
Right.
work, being with the world, being with the environment, like all the ways. And rather than needing to do something to have that experience of oneness or integration or, you know, experiencing the ineffable or the divine, you just need to actually almost stop doing and go in.
Yeah. Right. Well, we used to joke that, we call it practice,
Yeah.
yoga practice, and people would be like, yeah, but like, when does it get real? When do you
Yeah.
stop practicing, and you like have the performance or you do the
Yeah.
race, or whatever it is that you're practicing for?
Yeah.
And I think you're right that the thing that we're practicing for, we didn't know it, 20 something years ago, but
Yeah.
it's life is
Yeah.
the
It
thing you're
is
practicing
life.
for. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're a
Yeah.
householder.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I feel like once you've done a lot of practice, like very intense practices, as both you and I have, and been very immersed in that kind of almost monastic type of discipline that at some point you don't really need that kind of monastic discipline in the same way to embody the experience of yoga or the effects of yoga or the beingness of the yoga. But if you don't do it entirely, then after some time, it's like a mirror, and it's a typical Buddhist analogy, you're polishing the mirror. But it's so true. It's like if you do the practice and, any of these practices, meditation, pranayama, yoga, if you do all of them, great, you're really polishing that mirror. But at some point, maybe you don't need to do all of them so intensely because the mirror is already polished. And so you can reflect and see clearly and have that experience of yoga. But if you don't do them at all, especially over a longer period of time, the mirror starts to get dusty and dirty again. And so there is something to still needing to do the doing, maybe not at the same intensity as initially, because you've already cleaned up a lot of the crap that was clouding your vision.
Right. Your ability to sort of see reality clearly, see yourself clearly, how you move in the world. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's one of the pitfalls that I've seen with, as you say, we were sort of in that monastic, like it was like an all or nothing relationship to yoga. Right. And I loved it. I mean, if I hadn't been doing it there, I would have been doing it with something else. I would have been a triathlete or something. Like I needed at that time to be completely dedicated to something. And so we had that, which was a beautiful thing. But I think it's often that people then begin to believe that they have to continue that same level of intensity in order for it to work. So you're suggesting that the point is that you do purification, you clean the mirror for however long, and then you're just sort of doing touch-ups, right? From that on. Yeah.
It's interesting. A lot of women that I coach really struggle with this transition between I had this time in my life when I was able to do, my practice for 3 hours a day. And now I can't because I have work and a child or two and other responsibilities. And, I have to do carpool and all kinds of things. Right. And one of the analogies that I often use is at the beginning, when you're learning to drive, you have to take driver's lessons. You have to practice a lot. You have to think about it. You have to really learn the skill of driving. But at some point, like you don't have to take lessons anymore. You can just drive your car.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a little bit of this kind of transition of there's a time and a period where you really need to maybe go deep if that's in your path. But then at another stage in life, you have all of that tools, all of that wealth of knowledge, all of that experience. Just live your life and like trust that it's there.
Yeah, which I think applies to people like that. I feel like as we age, and for women, is that more marked stage of life where you're like struggling to physically or do what you used to do, whether it's yoga or people who jog, run, whatever it is, the gym, it's like your threshold for exertion changes in a certain stage of life. So I hear you talking about how much so many of us struggle with that. Whereas it's natural, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it is so challenging. It is so challenging because also there's like actual chemicals in our body that we're kind of addicted to, right? Endorphins, like the opium, the natural opium of our bodies, the serotonin, the dopamine, like all of these things give us hits. Like we're being rewarded for doing them, which is wonderful. And it's why we keep doing them. But as you're saying, at a certain stage, maybe it's health related, maybe it's age related, maybe it's stage of life related. There's lots of reasons that we come up against obstacles to maintaining that kind of regime or routine. And then I think one of the most challenging things is we're not getting those same hits because we can't do the thing. And the weird thing about like Ashtanga yoga, which you and I practiced for so long is it keeps getting harder. So you keep having to do more to get the hits. So it's like kind of a double whammy because, when you're doing third series, if you go back to primary series or first series, you don't get that same dopamine hit. You don't get that same endorphin hit.
Right. It makes you want to fall asleep, actually. You go back to primary, I get to the end, I'm like, woo, nap time. Wow. I'm so like relaxed. All the energy just went like down in a way that can be very important and good. I've had to befriend that kind of energy, in my body. Yeah.
And it is a type of addiction, I think, to this dopamine or to these endorphins or to this feeling of being successful or achievement or, growth or however you want to frame it. And then when you're not doing that, maybe your body gets so tired that the next day you're like, I don't know if this is really good for me. I don't know if I can really maintain this kind of routine or this kind of pressure on myself, or I'm really redlining with stress and I can't actually demand my body to perform at this kind of level right now because I'm already redlining with stress. And this is just adding more stress to my life, right? And so when you hit that, then it's a bit of an identity crisis or like a deep, deep crisis comes up where you then are sort of faced with the deeper question, which is where I think the yoga really begins, which is who am I when I'm not doing this practice, or I'm not successful, or I'm not achieving, or I'm not winning, or whatever the thing is, whatever that practice has been feeding you or giving you, you have to all of a sudden face yourself and ask that question and find out what the answer is and do the deeper work, which doesn't have to do with the asana or how long you can sit in lotus or any of that, how long you can hold your breath. I don't know. There's all kinds. We create like these levels of achievement, no matter what type of spiritual practice we're doing. We kind of turn it into a way to feel good about ourselves or to say, oh, I'm growing, I'm succeeding, I'm getting better.
Yes. So I project, Harmony, you can tell me if this is right or wrong, your experience. I project that you, having been recognized as one of a handful of the most advanced, in quote, advanced women in the world, right? In this practice of Olympic yoga, that this moment of you turning the gaze towards that question of who am I without that achievement, could you tell us about what that was like or is like?
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's been some of the deepest work. And
no doubt.
That's also why I went into coaching, was because that's where it led me. I was like, I can't really do this alone. I actually need someone to hold space, who has a process, who has skills, who has a deeper understanding of what's going on here, because no real yoga teacher I was familiar with was offering this kind of service or space of really inquiry, of really questioning, of really being able to sit with the emotions, with the feelings coming up, with the doubt, with the questions, those bigger questions. What I grew up with in the yoga path, and probably you can relate to this, was really, do your practice and all is coming. Or, oh, we'll just practice. It's like, can I take a day off? No, not unless you have a fever. Or you're pregnant. It's like, what?
Right.
You can only take a day off if I have a fever or I'm pregnant? This is crazy. So there wasn't really someone who was like allowing for this deeper inquiry to happen that I knew. So I really went into, doing some deep work through using some other tools. And I mean, they're spiritual tools, because it's a type of spiritual coaching I was doing where you're working with like the somatic awareness, which is pretty profound. And then the emotional body, the emotional sort of mastery and intelligence, as well as, mindset, mental work, as well as your energy body, and then your behaviors. And so, it's been pretty wild. And it's been very interesting to see how often, one point when I first started my yoga journey, I would have said that yoga like fixes everything or it's the answer to
Sure.
everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. I remember that.
And like, yeah, you get really excited and you're just like this is gonna fix everyone, heal the world. Everyone should do yoga. I think at the beginning, it really feels like a deep awareness is happening, and a deep awareness is happening, probably something that you haven't experienced before. Like if you've never brought consciousness into your hands or your fingertips or your toes or your feet or your hamstrings or your lower belly. I don't know, right? There's all kinds of areas of our body we don't think about behind the heart center. Having your consciousness or your mind, your awareness move into these areas of your body is pretty phenomenal. It's pretty exciting, right?
Right. And
Consciousness is like
bring up a lot of
moving.
stuff. Brings up a lot of stuff.
Yes. And it
Mm-hmm.
does. Like, yeah, you're opening your hips and you're crying, and it feels really like transformational and profound that way. Because our body holds our emotions and our memories and our patterns. And
Right.
so it is a type of somatic release and somatic awareness and process that you're engaged in when you're doing the yoga. But then it's interesting because I think the journey is like at a certain point, you kind of get all that initial somatic release. And then, especially for practitioners who are doing it every day, like we were, and like for a pretty long time, like a short practice is 90 minutes,
Yeah. Yes.
which is, I mean, most people are like, what?
I know I've noticed that most of the fitness classes now are down to 45 minutes.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, humans are losing their attention span, I think, not increasing. We're like, what's that called? Like de-evolving.
Yeah. I think there's some of that going on for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But after a certain time, you're doing all of this work, but then it becomes like you get a new baseline, a new normal. And the funny thing about, I don't know, humans, I think, is that we like to create hierarchy, or like we just start projecting all of our old stuff onto the new thing.
It's
So,
true.
yeah, it kind of works for a while. And then we're just like doing the same pattern that we did with whatever, school or your career or whatever. And we're just projecting it now onto the practice.
Right.
And for a while, it's kind of okay because it kind of works where you're like, achieving and being successful, or you feel like you're growing in that way, which is giving you all those juicy brain chemicals that we talked about, right? And so you're feeling good. But it's kind of like a cover up, it seems like a band-aid in a way for these deeper insecurities.
Right. Yeah.
Which those are the ones that are really kind of motivating us a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
Am I
Mm-hmm.
enough? And what is
Yeah.
enough?
Yes. I'm guessing that's something that comes up in your coaching work a lot, where
Yeah,
you're reminding people that they're
totally.
enough. Yeah.
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 And not even reminding, but just being able to presence that, whatever it is, there's sort of a few core wounds that we all share. And to be able to presence it and see it and feel it and be with it and recognize, even maybe notice where that pattern first came from, doing a little bit of heart's work potentially, was this a 2-year-old? Was this a 3-year-old? Like just
Mm-hmm.
noticing what's showing up from that feeling. And often it starts as a feeling in the body. So for example, if you're like I was working with a client and there's a feeling of anxiety or like overwhelm. And when you sit with that feeling in the body of what that feels like, then maybe a memory opens up of like, or an image. You get like this thing, and maybe there's a memory of a child or you as a child, of feeling like, you can't fix your parents, or feeling your mom being anxious, and you're picking up on all that energy and feeling like I should be doing something to help this. Right. And so doing some of that deeper work where you're actually being with those parts of ourselves that made these beliefs from the beginning. And sometimes they're pre-linguistic as well. Maybe it's just a feeling of like, I need to make this better and I don't know how, right? Or something's wrong, it must be me. I mean, these are big and they're mostly unconscious for us. Like even when we're aware of like, oh yeah, I have that old I'm not good enough wound, right? They still act up from time to time. But the beautiful thing is when you do the inquiry work, when you slow down and go into the body, and I think the yoga practice gives you that ability, actually. I would say that's the one thing that I really am grateful for is you got 25 years of going into your body and feeling yourself from the inside. You can get there pretty fast when you're doing some of these mental emotional processes where it's like, okay, just slow down. And where are you feeling it in your body? Is it in your gut? Is it in your heart? Is it in your throat? Can you be with it? Can you be with that uncomfortable sensation? Can you breathe into it? Can you presence it? What's there? And I mean, you get there really fast because you know the path to get there.
Right. Yeah. You know how to get the mind into the body.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like your work, your coaching work now, I can see how it's a really natural progression from yoga.
Yeah. And a lot of people, like, I think the yoga really teaches you to stay with the uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can just be with it and stay with it. And often what happens, we want to escape back up into the mind, like tell a story about it or talk about it rather than feel it. And so that's some of the work that I
Right.
do is helping people stay with the feeling and see what comes up from it. Cause that's the real juice because we're afraid to feel. We're afraid to feel it. And I think a lot of times in the yoga practice, especially with the Ashtanga practice, because I can speak to that going very far at a very advanced level, doing all kinds of contortionistic things with my body. At a certain point in time, it kind of becomes about not feeling in a way. Like you kind of get numb to the sensation, or you're so open, you're so mobile, you're so strong and flexible that like there's a level of not feeling that's actually there. And so even though you're doing all these crazy things with your body, you kind of are feeling like great. Right? It's like that dopamine, the endorphins, like you're just flooding your system all the time with these amazing chemicals. And then you walk out and you feel like a superhero. You feel so high and you're like, I'm amazing.
Yep. That's the feeling. I've heard Dominic talk about the trance state. You know, that one of the things about Ashtanga yoga is that you're in a trance state.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. And then there's the question of like, oh, well, now it's time to take my kid to school and like make dinner and, you know, do all the things that you do in life. So I think that what we're talking about today is how does yoga help with that?
Yeah. And it's really frustrating. I mean, I even find it frustrating, you know, often I'm in that pattern of like, I wish I had 5 hours. I just want to practice and like do all the things and be in that beautiful space and feel all those chemicals. Like, I don't want to make breakfast. I don't want to drive to school. I don't want to make lunch. I don't want to do the laundry. I hate cleaning the house. Like, I just don't want to do it.
Yeah, right. You want to
No.
be in the trance state.
Yeah. Please let me be in the trance state. But yeah, so how does it help us? I don't know. I mean, no, I do know. But no, I think there's like a little bit of a push-pull that happens, really. You know, that like, is it helpful? Yes, I think it builds resiliency. And I've seen this in all of the people I know who have a very regular yoga practice or who have had and sustained a regular practice for a long period of time. There's an inner knowingness in them that they can do hard things.
Great point. That is a great point.
And so it builds a lot of resiliency and a lot of consistency because that discipline of getting up and doing that practice day after day after day, even if you're not getting up and doing the practice day after day after day anymore, there's something else you're doing day after day after day. And so you've just shifted that discipline from like, oh, I'm going to do 90 minutes of asana and an hour of pranayama and an hour of meditation to, okay, I'm going to get up. I'm going to make the breakfast. I'm going to be nice to my kid. I'm going to drive to school, right? I'm going to do the things that I'm required to do. And I'm going to show up. I know how to show up for myself and for other people.
Right. So you still have like a desire that you love to do practice every day, but you don't have as much time.
I mean, yeah, I have the strong desire, but also this is my conversation. If you have the desire, why aren't you doing it? And then I say, well, I can't get up at 4 a.m. I'm already getting up at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. And if I get up at 4 a.m, I don't think I'm going to feel good come 4 or 5 o'clock at night, or I'm going to need to take a nap in the middle of the day. And then the other part of me is like, yeah, but if you want to do it, you should do it.
It's like pacing yourself, right? For
Yeah.
everything that is like present in the day. I noticed that transition in my life the last
Yeah.
decade, probably, where it was
Yeah.
like, oh no, there's like more things to do. There's more stress. I'm busier.
Mhm.
And I noticed the first thing I notice in my body is stress and
Yeah,
how
me
it
too.
causes pain, discomfort, stiffness. It just makes everything harder physically.
Yeah. And one thing I've noticed, speaking of stress, is like that's the other thing when you're dealing with a lot. And I mean, you have your own business, you're writing books, you're teaching online courses, you're
Hmm.
doing the workshops, you're like really an entrepreneur running your own business at a very high level. You have a podcast, you're doing all the things. So, all of that is this accumulation of stress in the nervous system and in the body. And what I've noticed for myself, also doing all the things here, is that that level of stress actually almost acts as a deterrent to the practice.
It does.
And so it's really weird because you're like, I want to practice. I know I should practice, but like my body actually is like resisting the practice. My mind is resisting the practice. Everything in me is saying, this is not good for me. But like there's
Yeah.
this other part that really is like, but I know it'll be good for me. I know I can do it, you know?
For me, it started to just cause pain.
Yeah.
Like it just
Yeah.
started. If I did
Totally.
too much
Yeah.
time, if I went over an hour, basically
Yeah.
that's what it was. It was if I went too long
Yeah.
with asana practice, I would be in pain. It
Yeah.
didn't
I
even
believe
matter
it.
what I was doing. It was like about the time, which of course I had to do all these experiments. It took like 2 years to figure that out. Like, why am I in pain all the time? And a lot of it is the stress just lodging in the body.
Yeah.
And as you say, sort of at odds with the activity of yoga, of that. It's
Yeah.
like the body wants to rest and
Hmm.
rejuvenate and reset, and that
Yeah.
didn't used to be there. It used to be the trance state, the juicy chemicals. And then it
Yeah.
started shifting, and I could see it shift in relationship to how much responsibility I was taking on.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I would watch over the course of that 10 years. It was like I was teaching more, I was traveling more. I started with the Ayurveda, and then
Yeah.
things got really busy. I was teaching the Mysore program, and then on the weekends, on my days off, I was teaching
Traveling.
Ayurveda. So I would go a month without a day off, and of
Yeah.
course I loved everything I was doing, but I could feel the difference in
Yeah.
somatically, as you say, in my
Mhm.
body. And then, I mean, I hit 41 and it was
Mhm.
like, okay, we're screeching to a halt now. you know,
Oh.
like everything has to change is what it felt like. And for me, I'd say it was a couple years, three,
Hmm.
4 years maybe
Yeah.
of figuring out like that journey that you're talking about of who
Mhm.
am I?
Yeah.
When you put your heart and soul into something, and also that it was professionally for both of us, it was our
Yeah. Yeah.
public figureness. It was
Totally.
also there. And I mean, you still teach, you travel,
Hmm.
you don't run like a daily program anymore, but you travel and teach. And that's
Yeah.
been the case for a number of years, right?
Yeah. I mean, during COVID, not so much. That's
Right.
when everything started online. I feel like that was
It's true.
online time is pretty crazy.
Yeah. No, it's true. That caused a big shift, didn't it?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
in the work that we do.
For
Yeah.
me, that caused a bit. I mean, I love it. I love the work that I do online. I love that I can connect with people online. I'm so grateful that you and I can talk and be in totally different
Right.
parts of the world and we can have this. But I do think that the more you're online, and I even just think of it like working in an office, we were so lucky. We didn't have to do that for so many years ever, you know.
It's true. It's true. I know. I did. You're right.
I feel like I'm living life in reverse. We just like we were free. We just doing yoga and out in nature and with people. And it was very relaxed, really. The most stressful thing is like, oh, I got to get up at 3 in the morning, but you could go to bed at 6 p.m. So it wasn't really that stressful, right?
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. I remember when I was like probably 21,
Yeah.
a Swami in India, we were like, I don't know, on some boat ride together. She was like, you're doing this you're doing it backwards. Like according to like the Vedic wisdom and the movement of the stages that we sort of move through life, she was like, you are backwards. Like you're trying to be a renunciant now.
Yeah.
And at some point, probably in my late 20s, I realized that I had renounced everything that I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even know what I had
Yeah.
renounced, you know,
I
like
know.
family, relationship, career, money, home. I didn't have
Yeah.
any of those things.
Me
And I
too.
was like, yeah. And I had like a desire for, and suddenly out of nowhere, you know, like in
Mhm.
my early 30s, it was like, no, I need a home and I want a relationship. Like it's too easy just by myself. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
too easy. So I started to like want all those things and I started to bring them in. And it was to the detriment of the trance state
Yeah.
and the yoga practice to bring those things in. But it was like you said, we're doing it in reverse. And it was like, I have to do these things in this lifetime. I know I do.
Yeah. And also, I feel like that cocoon of, sannyasi, early sannyasi life, early renunciate life was a deep stage of growth and development and learning and wisdom. And I mean, I was thinking about this earlier today, actually. There's so much inside my body, just like in my cells, in my tissues, and even in my memories, like such clear memories of that period of life. It feels like crystal clear. Like, ask me about last week. I have no idea what happened.
Totally. Or like, what did I just walk into this room to do? I don't remember.
Right? But from that cocoon, I feel like it's so natural and important to share. And it was like, I don't know, God, the universe, consciousness, I think really fed us. And then it's
Hmm.
like, you have to go teach, you have to go share what you've learned, you have to go and be in the world now because we need you.
Yeah.
And there's been a few people that I know who also have had this type of experience, maybe in a slightly different way, maybe not in the Ashtanga yoga way, but in another way, doing, therapy or different things, who really like had this cocooned kind of early learning and development, like doing all the Vipassana meditations, doing all the yoga, doing all the deep inner work. And then I mean, they're just kind of been kicked out into the world. And it's like, okay, now you're on, get out there. It's time to help people and change the world. So I
And,
feel like
and
it's good. It's good. It's just challenging for us
yeah.
introverted solo types.
So one of the things I've heard you say is that for you, running a business is a spiritual path. Yeah, which I think might sound kind of funny to some folks. Can you tell us a little bit how that's like manifested for you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is interesting because also it's been something I've had to really confront and work through in myself because, again, I
Me
think you'll
too.
relate to this. Yeah. When we were spending all that time in India and training and practicing, the whole idea was like, you don't advertise, you just hang a shingle and people show up. And running a business was like kind of poo-pooed or frowned upon, right? Like authentic people don't run businesses. They just teach and somehow survive.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, meanwhile, our teacher is like in there counting the money bill by bill, literally.
I remember that dichotomy, yeah, for sure, where people were like really financially struggling and being like, but wait, like this isn't working for me, you know, like what am I doing wrong?
Yeah. And so I don't know where this ethos came from because I don't really feel like it came from, our teacher, Sri K. Patabi Joyce, or even Sharat Joyce. I mean, those guys love money. They
Yeah.
love making money. They love running a business. It was like literally a lot of it was about the money.
Well, and money is God's blessing.
Yes. It's
It's
like
not a dirty
Lakshmi.
thing. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
sign that you're doing something right.
Yeah, it's just another form of energy and prana. So the more energy you're giving, you're bringing, that you're accumulating, it's natural you're going to accumulate wealth, which is kind of funny because this seems like a lot of the stuff I'm hearing out there in the in the universe today, the new spiritual gurus. But
It's
but it
true.
definitely, yeah, it comes from that. But Anyway, I had a lot of hangups, and maybe they're also part of our Christian culture of, Jesus walked around without any belongings as a spiritual teacher, and we're sort of unconsciously feeling like, well, how can I be spiritual and make money? How can I be spiritual and run a business? How do I integrate these two things? So yeah, I had to do a lot of work around it. But when I finally wrapped my head around this idea of like, listen, I mean, I had taught for myself for a long time since I was, 22. I'd been teaching yoga. I'd run my own yoga studio even. And I think that was kind of the first little taste of like, okay, I'm going to make a company. Okay, I have a company. I guess I'm running a business, right? It was like my first sense of like, okay, this is a business. I have to pay rent. I have to bring in students. I have to teach. I don't get paid if there's no students. So it was real.
Right. Did you advertise?
Yes,
Yeah.
I sure did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I even did teacher trainings. I mean, that was the other crazy thing. We weren't supposed to do teacher trainings. It was like, I got to make money. I got to share what I know, what I'm here to do. So, yeah, but I still didn't really know what I was doing. I never like learned really anything about business. I just learned by doing it, which is, I guess, the school of life and how many of us learn. But then when I started doing more online business, I started getting more interested in like, okay, this is a skill and it's a skill I can learn and I can develop. And it's not a bad thing. It's actually really helpful because if I want to share my gifts with the world, I need to know how to do that. I need to know how to reach people. And I'm not reaching people to like steal from them or like trick them, right? I'm actually reaching people to serve them, to help them so that their lives are better in some way.
Right. Like that's the motivating factor is that you have this thing you want to share.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. But then business as a spiritual path is interesting because it makes you, once you decide that, like, okay, and it could be any goal, it doesn't have to be business. It's just like with business, there's a lot of goals, there's a lot of things that you're trying to do and manage. So it kind of forces you to do this deeper inner work, right? Where you have to look at your beliefs around, like, why do I feel like social media is so hard? Why do I feel like I don't want to show up there? What's going on?
Yes, exactly. What's going on? Like, what's behind this?
Yeah.
Rather than blame it all on the social media.
Yeah, because nothing outside of us is actually holds any value. And I think this is where like a lot of the spiritual practices we've done, what it's taught us is anything outside of us is neither good nor bad. It's just things happening. It's just external stuff, right? How we're projecting onto it, what we're projecting onto it, how we're feeling, and how we're feeling is really just because how we're feeling. It has something to do with us, with our internal state, with our history, with our thoughts, with our beliefs, with our emotions, with our energy, with our memories, with all these things, right? Is really interesting. And that's like where the work happens. So that, if we're looking at it and we're like, oh, business is bad, it's like, why do I believe business is bad? Like, and is it bad for everyone? Like, do I look at Apple and think, oh, they're so evil? Or do I look at, I don't know, like Robert Svoboda and think he's evil, like, or is it just me that I'm like looking at myself and thinking, oh.
Yeah, like I'm not supposed to be doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if that's it, I'm not supposed to be doing this. Oh, let's dig into that. Where's that come from?
Right. So you've unpacked like blockage after blockage as you've been moving in the direction of running a business.
And I think that that's the spiritual work. I mean, if you're not doing that, I don't know what kind of spiritual work you're doing, but I don't think that it's working.
Right. Which I will say that for me, running a business has also been something that has brought up things that I've never seen before, different things than that could have been brought up by, say, a yoga technology, or an experience in the body. I mean, these are things where it's like I'm sweating. It's deeply scary and gnarly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because you're confronted with this ego, with this personality that, I mean, we can go all yoga and transcendental and be like, yeah, it doesn't really exist. It's not real. But when you're putting it on the line, you're putting it out there, when you're taking risks, yeah, you bet your nervous system thinks it's real.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
And so then it's like, okay, well, we really we got to work with this. It's here, it's present, it's alive. Where did this come from? What does this mean? Is it even true? What is it bringing up for me? And yeah, unpacking all of that. And to me, when you get to the root of it, then you connect back into your essence and you can integrate that dysregulated pattern or that fear, that anxiety. And when it integrates, then you see it. Oh, it's not so big and scary. It's okay. And then we're not living our life from an unconscious place, or we're not putting all these upper limits on ourselves. I mean, that's another interesting pattern, when you have a lot of money stuff, which all of us have. So if you don't think you have money stuff, you haven't actually been there. It doesn't matter how much money you have, you got money stuff. How much or how little, right? But you make more money, but then you spend more money because it's not safe to actually have more money. Right. So it's like interesting, or you're constantly limiting how much you can make because you don't believe like your worth or your services are worth more, or you don't believe people will pay more for your services. So it's like really interesting because you get to explore all of those limitations, upper limits, lower limits, beliefs about yourself, beliefs about others, beliefs about your services, your skills.
Right.
And it's like
it's
a lot
heavy stuff.
easier. Yeah, it's a lot easier when you just can like go to a yoga studio and have them give you a paycheck and you don't have to deal with it.
I know that was the way I chose to do it. I never owned a studio. I was like, no, thanks. So that was where it was 2020, where everything shut down, that I needed to figure it out. I need to figure it out. And I was suddenly put in, as I think you were too, just suddenly put in this place of being like, okay, what are we doing now? And I was like, I am not going to not work. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
and it was a
you
process.
knew you could do hard things.
It's true. You're right. And it's funny because as we talk about it through that lens, all the things that I have learned through yoga practice, they manifest through business. It's so funny. It's not what I would have thought, but it all manifests through the activity of the work that we do now.
Yeah. And I think like exactly what you're saying, that the yoga practice, in a way, it doesn't solve your problems. Like, I don't think it's actually, I mean, outside of the initial sort of somatic awareness and like integration and release, it doesn't take away any of these things. Like, it doesn't actually heal your I'm not good enough wound, at least not in my experience. But what it has done is it's given me the ability to do that work and to do it pretty efficiently and pretty effectively, so that's easy, actually. Like, doing the work is easy if I want to do the work. But just doing the yoga practice doesn't mean that I'm going to do that work.
That's why we call it practice. Right. And then the work, it has set you up to do the work that is happening in your life, which I think you and I, we didn't really have a life for a long time because we were kind of monastic. Yeah, we were practicing, we were training. Life. We were in like a kind of like martial arts vibe, with the intensity of the training and the travel back and forth to India every year. It was full on. I'm so grateful for it. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Yeah.
Yeah. And you get to, when people, I mean, I meet so many people now who, studied Ayurveda or who have, have their yoga teacher training or, whatever, but they were in corporate for 20 years. And I'm always sort of like, okay, like good luck. I mean, it's a lot of learning to do in a 2-month period.
Big transition. Yeah. Yeah. But they can do it backwards from how we did.
Yeah. But when you're like immersed in that, you really are able to speak with a lot of experience, I think.
It's true.
You've seen a lot, you've tried a lot of things. And I don't know about you, but I don't think I would have the, if I went and did a PhD or went to law school or did something totally different, I don't know that I would have the connection with myself, like big S self, or that connection to reality in the sense that I don't just like think we're all one. Do you know what I mean? That trance state, that state where you can tap into awareness and like maybe titrate between your limited ego self and then that bigger awareness self. I mean, for me, that's like a daily. If I'm freaking out and like losing my shit, I can pretty much connect to that space at any time very easily. I can be like,
There you go.
oh, yeah, like, oh, you're losing your shit. Okay, just you need to breathe. You need to like open your awareness. You need to recognize that you're focusing from a ego perspective. Your vision's getting very narrow and you're limiting your possibilities. You're disconnecting rather than connecting. And I think that just takes time and practice to have that path, to know that path. And so in a way, all of those years, I think, really build the patterning in your body. And it doesn't mean that life isn't going to be hard. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have these challenges. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to have to do some deeper work of inner healing, those childhood wounds and all of the stuff. But at least you have tools that are almost second nature.
Right. So when we're talking about tools now, we're not talking about asana, breathing practices, right? You're talking about the ability to expand your consciousness at any given moment while life is serving you up a pile of turd.
Exactly.
You know? And that's, I mean, yes, that's what yoga is now, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Totally.
So here we are 24 years later, and that's what yoga is. Yeah.
Yeah.
That being said, you still do some of the stuff in the morning? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Not always in the morning. Sometimes I do my practice at night, Nancy Gilgoff style.
Yeah, it's true. So you do like, does it vary seasonally or?
Yeah, so typically, I mean, back in the day, I would always do everything in the morning and it was kind of a 4-hour routine.
Wow.
Which, yeah, is a lot. But now when I had Jediah, I had to kind of split it up a bit. So I'd go in and teach and then I'd practice afterwards. And then it was more like a 2-hour routine, you know. And then now, typically my day when I'm at home, when I'm traveling, it's a little bit different. But when I'm at home, I wake up and I like to actually just lie in bed and be cozy and go in and just feel my body from the inside. So I am not one of those people that likes to jump out of bed. I've just admitted this about myself. I don't like it. I find it incredibly jolting to my nervous system. I really like to have my alarm if I need an alarm. If I don't have an alarm, I will wake up at 5:30 every day. But if I want to get up earlier, I will set my alarm. And I intentionally set it earlier than I need to get up so that I can push snooze. I just build it into my routine. It's like, I like to snooze because I find that time early in the morning, that time between dreaming and awake, so rich. It's so good for me because I'm a bit of a lucid dreamer. So it's like being in Shavasana first thing in the morning. Cool. Like I just go there. I just drop into Shavasana and I'm like lucid dreaming. I get messages. I get all kinds of fun things. So I don't like to jump out of bed. I am not a Mel Robbins jump out of bed 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I tried it. Don't like it. Not doing it. Love Mel, but no, please let me just snooze. Okay.
Well, it sounds like it's a fruitful thing for you.
Yeah, I need a little softer entrance. And I don't lie there and ruminate and feel anxious and nervous. I mean, if that starts coming up, I'll just get up and go. Right. But I actually just like, I'm like, oh, I love this. Life is so good. I get to just lie here and do nothing.
That's great. I love that. I think a lot of us should take that away from this episode and give that a try.
Yeah, I just accepted that that was a part of something that I really, really liked. So I just built it into my day. And typically on these days, I'll get up, I'll have my water. Yeah.
First thing. Yeah.
I'm pretty good with that. I usually remember the water. And sometimes I do lemon, but not usually. Usually I just do straight up purified water. No, water? Just room temperature.
Room temp.
Because then I could just drink it like half a
away.
Liter. Like, flush the system. And then usually I will meditate for 20 minutes to a half hour. Then, and this could happen in 2 different orders. one could be breakfast and lunch preparation and then meditation, or it could be meditation and breakfast and lunch preparation, depending on what time my son has to go to school. So,
Right, which changes, which
exactly.
crazy thing, but it changes. Yep.
Sometimes he has to be there at 7 a.m. Sometimes he takes the bus at 8 a.m. So, it's like a whole thing. And then usually I'll shower and then I try to do my pranayama, but that doesn't always happen at that time of day. But that's my new goal for this year, is to do my pranayama after my shower first thing in the morning, because that's the best time for me. I totally notice the difference. If I don't do my pranayama first thing in the morning, I'm kind of really irritable by 4 p.m.
Are you doing like an alternate nostril?
I have like a whole thing, Kapalabhati, some alternate nostrils, some Ujjayi pranayama, some Bastrika, some Shitali. It's like a whole thing.
A whole little rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah, a whole little routine. Yeah, but I've noticed that I start to get like, there's just
Edgy.
something in my edgy. Yeah, like I want to be angry at people.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is, I hear this from moms where it's like you do a little bit and then you do some stuff that you have to do and then you do another little bit, right? It doesn't all happen in a chunk. Right? It's kind of happening at these little junctures throughout your day or in the afternoon or evening. Yeah, that makes sense. That seems to be the mom life.
That's the mom life. And I've just, I thought that when he wasn't a toddler, it was going to be easier. And it actually feels like it's more challenging. And people say, well, just make him get his own breakfast and do his own lunch. And I could, yes, but I don't want to.
Yeah, you want to do it for him. You want to do it.
I mean, you know what? He's, he's very independent. And he really relies. He's like, oh, thank you so much, mommy. He's like so grateful and so sweet and nice when I do things for him in the morning.
Totally worth it. Yeah. Yeah. Totally worth it.
And I feel like if I'm home and he's home, I mean, he's away all day. He does his own things at night. It's like a short moment in time that I can just show up for him. That's it.
Right.
And so for me, that feels important.
That makes sense.
I'm sure like maybe next year or the year after he's going to do it. It's going to change, of course, right? Everything's always changing with the kids, and that's the only thing you can count on. But right now, that seems to be the way it is. So maybe next year he'll be getting his own breakfast, or he'll say, I don't want you to make breakfast for me anymore. And I'll be like, great.
Or you'll be like a little sad.
Yeah, I'll be a little sad.
Yeah.
But I'll also be like, okay, great. Please feed yourself, though. I mean, that's the other thing. I just want to know that he's eating something more than Mr. Noodles.
Yes, right.
Like,
so you have to oversee that.
Oatmeal. I can get him a protein smoothie. I can feed him nutritious food, not just Mr. Noodles, which is a whole problem with teenage, I don't know, a boy, I guess. Maybe girls too. I don't know.
I think we all have access to a lot of that kind of food that's just easy, and not as nourishing. So it's, you get in a habit with it.
Yeah. And then, you're just like,
then you're
I'll
stuck.
Just make this.
Yeah.
And then you're just eating, I don't know, not great, not really like prana rich food.
Yeah. Yeah. Which will add up over time. Right. And then we'll feel crappy. Yeah. So
yeah. And then I'll practice yoga in the afternoon or in the evening.
Yep. So your body feels fine in the morning. You're okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I really don't force the asana in the morning. So I kind of gave up on that part.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm in a space where I have to open the channels.
Sometimes I do like some gentle stretching or some sun salutations, but honestly, I'm never doing a hard practice anymore. I'm just really trying to open the channels and just trying to keep my spine from becoming kyphotic.
Exactly. Me too. I want to be able to bend over and get in and out of the car, tie my shoe, keep those things working.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And just also, like you're saying, I feel like for me as well, and maybe it's true for most people, I feel the stress accumulating in my body a lot. And when I do asana, so that's why sometimes at the end of the day, it can be also helpful because it kind of releases it a bit.
Definitely.
in the morning also, like, I mean, anytime, it just feels like it's kind of opening things up in a different way and really regulating the nervous system. So,
Exactly. Yeah. For me now, it's more of a nervous system thing, right?
yeah.
Than anything else. Yeah.
Which is funny.
Yeah.
Like, what's your experience with the advanced asana? How do you feel like that fits in with practicing yoga for all of these years? And you did advanced series also for many, many years. And how do you feel like that is fitting with like nervous system regulation and what we're talking about, like longevity and sustainability?
I feel as you have so well described already, it was a period of training, and I
Yeah.
feel like the advanced asanas push the nervous system way harder than
Yeah.
anything else. So it was a period of time where I had to keep my life very simple in order
Mhm.
to sustain that level of practice because I'm a very
Totally.
subtle being,
Yeah.
my boat gets rocked really easily. And so it was kind of a constant tonification of the
Mhm.
nerves, which is described, in the yoga text. Like
Yeah.
that's a thing, so we were doing that on purpose, which I think a lot of people don't understand about
Yeah.
that aspect of the practice, that it does have an efficacy. Because of that, now I think am able to attune and tap into that skill, like you've
Yeah.
described, the
Yeah.
ability to calm the nervous system when necessary. Like I know how to
Yeah.
do that, and I also have withstood a lot of pressures,
Yeah.
nervous system pressure. That's what's so cool about yoga. I feel like it works very specifically with the nervous system. So
Yeah.
I have, just like you've described, Harmony, like I have that ability to just like sense what's going on, see it
Yeah.
for what it is, because I know the feeling. I know it in my
Yeah.
body. And I think that the more advanced the asanas get, the more we tune that muscle and grow
Yeah.
that ability, So you don't need to keep doing it. That's
Yeah.
the thing is once you've learned, this is my experience, maybe this is true for you, but once you've learned what you are supposed to learn from an asana, if you keep doing it blindly, it will hurt you.
I love
Like
that.
that's been my experience is like when it's time to let that stuff go and move into a
Mhm.
different kind of work, for
Yeah.
me, I'll always fight it. I don't love change. I just want to keep the routine, keep doing the same thing I've been doing. And this is every step along the way. It's been like that. I'll fight it,
Mhm.
and then it hurts me
Yeah.
in some way. And then I'm like, okay, all right, I'll move into like, a different kind of work, which I think that's what
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about with you today, is
Mhm.
how the work that you do changes over the
Yeah.
course of the life, and having a kid, running a business, being more busy and also doing what you're supposed to be doing in this lifetime, in this body. I think that's important that we did what we did all those years in order to now be doing what we're doing now.
100%. I can't agree more. And I mean, we've talked about this before, just you and I, but I think it's worth saying. I think, especially for women, again, can only speak to being a woman because that's the only experience I have in this lifetime. But I think there's a real identity, like a letting go of an identity that happens, especially around that time that you're talking about, like in your 40s, 50s. And it's big. It's a big shift. And it happens like everything's kind of happening all at the same time. Your kids are getting older. Oftentimes your career's changing. Oftentimes your hormones are changing. It's like the second puberty. There's so many shifts and changes happening at that stage of life. It's really hard. It's really difficult. And I think the more we can be compassionate with ourselves and just like let ourselves navigate that change in a soft way, in a compassionate and a loving way with ourselves, in a nurturing way, in a way where we're building ourselves up and holding ourselves in that space, the easier it's going to be. I feel like the more forceful and disciplinary or the more we're trying to resist that change, like you're saying, it becomes
Hmm.
painful. Like
Yeah, it does.
it's so
Yeah.
painful
Yeah.
because it's not just physical, it's emotional, it's mental, it's energetic, it's behavioral, it's the whole thing. It's your whole identity is shifting. And I think we can't underestimate what a big shift that is.
Agreed.
Like when we think about a girl moving into going through puberty, I think it's not even such a big shift in a way because we're not really, I mean, it's been like 12 years. But when you think of like the years that you're fertile, right? It's a
Right.
lot of your
Decades.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So there's
Yeah.
a real change that's going on. I think, yeah, speaking to what you've said is it's helpful to like listen and do that deep listening and be flexible with yourself and be nurturing and kind and compassionate and it will come. Like the only thing we can guarantee is the change. So
Exactly. It's true. And I think it's important for those of us who are experiencing it to talk about it. So I'm so
yeah,
grateful to be able to do that with you today.
thank
And I
you.
appreciate your honesty at all times, completely
Yeah.
candid. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
Thank you.
So you're coaching, you travel and teach, like there's a lot of
Yeah.
things going on. What's the best way for people to find out about how they can work with you?
Yes, the best way is to probably find me on my website, harmonyslater.com, or reach out to me on Instagram at Harmony Slater Official, because my name was taken
Oh,
and by bots. It's a whole other problem.
it's an awful thing. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
And then, yeah, you can come on over. I have a free 2-minute breath work exercise if you want to learn how to regulate your nervous system in 2 minutes. It really works. It's really good.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I have a quiz you can take. What is your spiritual entrepreneur archetype? And it's super fun and it gives you amazing, accurate results. And you can join my free Finding Harmony community and listen to the Finding Harmony podcast. So
Great. Thank you so much.
you're welcome. Thank you,
So I
Kate.
always ask three rapid fire questions, which
Yeah,
you've already answered
I
the
did
first
one in
one,
slow motion.
right? Yeah, which is what's the first thing you do when you get up, which is to snooze.
I snooze, yeah.
Yep, and have
But
your cozy time.
I feel like snooze is like it's kind of like it's like a dirty word for what I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. You're doing something different than that. You're in the liminal space.
That's it. That's what I
Yeah.
meant.
Yeah. Totally. Which I get that. And then next question, what's the first thing that goes in the mouth, is your water?
Yeah. If that
Your
counts, that's my water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then your wind down routines. What's your thing, like your one thing that you kind of have to do to get some sleep?
Ooh, to get some sleep. Sleeping, you know what? Sleeping has never been a problem for me. I'm
It's
very
so
lucky
great.
that way.
Some cuppa in your constitution, my friend. You
I know.
lucky.
I can like pretty much do anything before bed and I will fall asleep. But what I love doing if I'm a little bit wound up before I go to sleep is I listen to either a yoga nidra or I have this kind of meditation for the emotions kind of. I don't know, you
Mhm.
envision white light coming through your head and comes through it's like a healing
Mhm.
meditation for your body. It's also kind of a yoga nidra. And I like to listen to one of those two things. And there are these ladies. I mean, I can give you the notes if you want to put them in your show notes.
Yeah, let's do it for
Yeah,
sure. I want to do it too.
they're really good. The one is a freebie, or was a freebie. Dare to Rest by what's her name?
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, Karen Brody. I just downloaded it. Dare to Rest. And then the other one is an audio book, which I would recommend to everyone. And I don't get any kickbacks for
Yeah,
recommending
right.
this.
Right. Favorite book recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's from the woman who wrote Molecules of Emotion. And it's a really good book also. If you haven't read it, I would suggest reading Molecules of Emotion. She's a doctor. And what is her name? Candace Pert. But the meditation, she did a audiobook meditation called Psychosomatic Wellness.
Oh, there you go. That's a very clear name.
Yeah, and you can get it on
Yeah.
Audible. And I love listening to her meditation. I actually slow it down a little bit just to like
Ooh, nice.
like
Great idea. I've never thought of doing that. Well, that's super helpful, Harmony. Thank you for sharing your evening rest
those
routines with
two
us.
things, those
Yep.
two like yoga nidra things, I
Yep.
will fall asleep in probably 2 to 5 minutes.
Great. I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. So we'll put it in the show notes for the listeners as well. And thank you so much for being with us today, Harmony.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure.